In the first part of this video lecture, we have talked about aspects such as light and acoustics, sitting position, and equipment, and how they influence the hearing accessibility of a venue. The focus in this part is on the difference between online and on-site working contexts and on how organizers, participants, and speakers can become more active in the provision of hearing accessibility. I give the floor to Aida now.
As for what is different between on-site meetings and online meetings or online venues, first of all, the sense of the other participants differ. If you're in a room with people, you sense who they are. You sense when they're ready to say something. You might not see that if you're doing the meeting online. And even using assistive listening systems in both situations. In a physical meeting, when you're in the room together with other people, you may not hear right away who is saying something because you use directional hearing for that. And the assistive listening system is kind of providing you the sound directly into your hearing aids. So you might not sense it right away, but you would soon recognize the voice and you will look to the direction of where that person sits, and you would provide that person awareness, attention. When you're on an online meeting, when somebody speaks, the picture will change, of course, so you see the person that way, but it means for a person with a hearing loss that you don't really practice your directional hearing, and you must just practice every day to maintain it. So this is a very important feature, you could say, within hearing. In physical meetings, there might be background noises from people going through their papers or moving about a coffee or mug, things like that. But you can also have background noise in an online meeting when people don't turn off their microphone and do things around the computer and so. So you just need to know what you address and that you need to address it, and you can do it nicely. And this is needed to have a nice meeting. Then maybe online venues tend to be more strict to the point on the topic because you don't have a lot of chit chat. That is not really possible, because then it will flicker around with different pictures, and we soon get organized to make sure that we don't have all this changing around. We could have used automatic speech recognition for speech to text, and since that is not very good always, it does make you laugh and you could have fun that way. But otherwise, I would say that in a physical meeting, you meet before the meeting and you kind of say, how are you? And did it go well with so-and-so since we last met? And you sense the person. How is this person doing now? And then during the meeting, you have this feeling with you that you know this person is quite happy today, or this person has just had a message that he or she needs to go to some doctor for whatever. So you know what kind of mood the different people are in, and this is important. I think it is not that one is bad and the other is good, but I think these two things in the future will support each other well, so that we will know, okay, we need to meet now and then. And for quicker meetings, we can do it online. For one topic that we need to have this solved right now, then it would be good to say, okay, we can do that online because that is quicker. And then we can do the physical meetings for other purposes where we get to know each other and sense who are we, what kind of team are we. And then as to how to get organized. Speech to text works differently from one country to another. And some speech-to-text interpreters will by themselves ask, can I have the agenda for the meeting? Do you have more papers? Because then they prepare the meeting and have all the keywords for the meeting ready in their dictionary. In other countries, speech-to-text interpreters come here and write. That is how they do it. So they don't actually prepare. So, and this is also a matter of the salary. But having worked with IFO now for 6 years, there is a huge difference in the quality when a speech-to-text interpreter is prepared and knows the vocabulary of the meeting. It is not that the speech-to-text interpreter will know afterwards and go and chit-chat and talk a lot about the topics in the meeting. That is not what this is about. This is about typing fast and correctly. That is all that this is about. And then being able to write as close to the orally spoken language as possible. Then to prepare an online meeting, you will need to test the connection. The organizer of the meeting will open the platform for the meeting like 15, maybe 30 minutes before the meeting starts. Then the speech-to-text interpreter, the captioners, will log in and will check out, like in Zoom, the person will need an API token, and then that API token will allow the speech-to-text interpreter to write in the Zoom subtitles. It says text on top here. That is a radio transmission, which means that is good for in situ meetings, I mean physical meetings when you're in the room. And text on tap works online. And text on tap can also provide you with other languages if that is needed. So then you check the connection. You check that things work well. Typically also the speech-to-text interpreter would like to be a co-host of the meeting because that allows the interpreter to have more tools during the meeting and to navigate. Then we should also remember to introduce the subtitle and the role when we are a group of hard of hearing people meeting. It is obvious. We could kind of just saying, "Oh, hello," to the speech-to-text interpreter, and we all know the person is there. But if I'm the only one in a meeting needing speech-to-text, I need to introduce a speech-to-text interpreter. And I also need to say, well, this means that we need to have breaks so-and-so because the interpreter will need to pause every now and then. So that is also important. And then if somebody speaks too quickly, either the speech-to-text interpreter or the user would have to break in and say, "Oh, could you slow down, or could you repeat, please, because this is too fast for the interpreter to follow you." If others are interested, because there might even be people in the meeting thinking they have typical hearing, but maybe it is not so well with the hearing after all. And then it could also be good to introduce the others to how to get the subtitles opened so that they can follow the text and see what is all this happening. And this has happened many times to me, that somebody else will look to the subtitles and say, "Wow, that was brilliant. It was actually far more easy for me to follow the meeting with this." So that is also a good way to introduce it, and people find out that it is kind of nice and more relaxed. And then we need to plan breaks for the real-time subtitler. And I actually prefer to have this sorted out between me and the organizers, so that the organizers will plan, okay, we do so and so many topics, and then we plan for the break, instead of me saying, "Oh, we have been working for more than 1 hour now. Could we have a break? Because, the subtitle, then it is better that we have it organized, and that the organizers know this, and that we train them. We train organizers in the future, that they know this could be part of the meeting, and that they would then, they will learn how to do it. The organizers of the event can also help online participants to contribute to accessibility. For instance, when the invitation link is sent out, it would be good to remind people to facilitate good audio, to use a microphone that is not just built into the computer, but for instance, that you wear it here, right under your mouth, so that you are at the same distance of the microphone all the time. This is also when you reach out to get more papers, you still wear your microphone that same distance, and don't enlarge the distance to the microphone in your computer, because then it will weaken the sound for us. It will weaken the sound for everybody. But with the hearing loss, we just don't have the efforts that it takes to listen that harder. It would also be good to remind people about switching off microphone when they are not in use, and also to do so with the camera if it is not needed. And then for online meetings and events, it is good to use the chat. But also don't overuse it. Don't come up with all sorts of topics. This is the topic we're talking about now. We're talking about hearing accessibility. So in the chat, we should not have an awful lot about vaccination and COVID-19 or some traffic accident or whatever. Stick to the topic. That is also good to remind people before the meeting, but also during the meeting, if the organizers see that this may happen, then to remind people kindly on how to participate in an online event. It is also a good thing to introduce yourself so that the interpreters have the names of everybody. In online meetings, most people have their names at the bottom of their picture. And that is, of course, also a help for the speech-to-text interpreter. But it is very good to have all the names of the participants for the speech-to-text interpreter to be able to indicate who is talking now. Many people have their names at the bottom of the picture when they participate in an online meeting, but some have only the name of the organization they represent. So it is very good to be aware of what are people's names. And in this respect, it may not be enough to just have 15 minutes preparation before start of the meeting. And it must be remembered also that when the speech-to-text interpreter meets 15, maybe 30 minutes before the meeting, this is their work. So they should be paid for this work. It is preparation. And then we also experience delay. Different technologies work differently. For instance, some speech-to-text interpreters prefer to use share screen for speech-to-text. To me, there is a bigger delay in this technology than when you use, e.g., the Zoom subtitles, or you use some, for instance, text on tap overlay. This works faster. So it does take extra time, and this will mean that people think, oh, maybe she's thinking of something completely different. But in fact, she, which is me, she's waiting for the text to pop up because it assures what you hear. Just recently, I was in a meeting and somebody asked me a question and ended up with my name. I thought I heard my name, but I wasn't sure. And there I was reading, and then came up my name. But everybody was waiting, thinking, oh, what is happening? So it is very good to know that this delay also shows in our behavior. And therefore, it is also good to know the best technologies for what is available in that particular setting. It is also good to know about hearing loss, to have knowledge about what is it that a typical hearing does, because it just makes you able to react here and now everywhere. And we are not just relying on the technology in the online meetings, we are also relying on the technology in our hearing aids, in the assistive listening systems. You know, there's also delay in these equipments. So delay on delay on delay, it does give us a different way to behave. So it is good to know that it is not intended to behave in a bad way or appear slow, because none of us like to do that. But it is good to know what are the consequences. And also that once we have the information, we are able to think, we're able to conclude, and we're also able to have opinions that relate to that very topic. So it's good to also focus on communication, and that the communication is the overall topic, that you talk to me as primarily a person, and we're discussing this topic, and not primarily, oh, she's a person with a hearing loss, so I better do it short. I better simplify my messages, because we are capable of advanced language skills, actually. Many of us are.
Speakers are also participants and co-designers of accessible communication. Their oratory skills, style, and nonverbal communication directly influence the extent to which their message is more or less accessible. By this, I mean their ability to organize speech or modulate their voices, but also their gestures and even the clothes they're wearing. So, what verbal and non-verbal aspects can improve communication? Using a microphone is recommended, but it's not everything. Speakers must be aware of their style, pace, and prosody. They can use them for making information more accessible for the audience. For instance, speaking quickly enables us to say more, but not necessarily to be better understood. According to Barker et al. 1980 and Nichols and Lewis 1954, we spend about 60% of our communication time listening, though we are only able to make meaning out of 25% of it. It is not about saying less, but about organizing your speech differently. For instance, you can use less words, or if that's not your style, then you may moderate your speed and use pauses. As a reference, newsreaders speak at a pace of between 150 and 170 words per minute, according to current research. So you can use this value as a reference when you practice at home. When speaking, you can also remember that your words and questions will reach the audience with a certain delay. Then your words must go through the interpreter or real-time subtitler first. As for nonverbal features, speakers should avoid walking around the room and turning back their faces from the audience. As we mentioned before, lip reading is key, and it becomes very challenging when the person with a hearing loss must chase the speaker's lips through the room while using the subtitles at the same time. One thing that often happens is that speakers don't keep their mic close to their mouth. They start moving around or moving their hands to point out things and forget to keep it close. Other times it's just because they're nervous and tend to gesture more with their hands. At any rate, it is always good for speakers to always remember that the subtitler is there and is trying to keep up with them. So, if possible, they can always double check with them, especially in difficult situations, such as in conference when spontaneous questions come up, or for instance, when panelists start talking at the same time. Okay, let's summarize the main ideas. To sum up, we can say that embedding hearing accessibility into working contexts aims at preventing barriers. This can be done by taking a holistic approach that integrates different types of features from the very beginning, that is, linguistic, physical, technological, and societal ones. Lastly, we have seen that hearing accessibility requires the awareness and contribution of all stakeholders, from organizers to participants to speakers to end users. Thank you very much. Exercises. The exercises for this video lecture are in the trainer's guide and in the PowerPoint file.
LTA Live Text Access, Universitat Autónoma de Barcelona, SDI, Internationale Hochschule, Scuola Superiore per Mediatori Linguistici, ZDF Digital, European Federation of Hard of Hearing People FHO, Velotype, Subti Access, European Certification and Qualification Association ECQA. Co-funded by the Erasmus Plus program of the European Union. Erasmus Plus project 2018-1-DE01-KA203-004218. The information and views set on this presentation are those of the authors and do not necessarily reflect the official opinion of the European Union. Neither the European Union institutions and bodies, nor any person acting on their behalf, may be held responsible for the use which may be made of the information contained here.